Well, hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. So excited to be with you and the Seat Network. Huge thanks to Joe for inviting Troy and I, Pushpay and Church Community Builder, to join you all today. I'm Tyler Snook. I'm part of the Pushpay and Church Community Ambassador team. Along with me is Troy Pollock, our Chief Ambassador over there at Pushpay. He was actually, fun fact, employee #1 for Pushpay when they landed here after crossing the beautiful seas of New Zealand to arrive here in the States to get things launched. Troy, how you doing?
Tyler, I'm doing fantastic. We were just talking with Joe before this. We're both in Seattle, and it's sub 60 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's raining today. And I'm assuming a lot of our audience is probably sweltering in heat and humidity right now. In fact, over your right shoulder, you have a fire on.
Yes.
Here we are in July.
It's actually cool enough to have the fireplace on. And, I'm sure like many of our viewers, we're still working at home. You're at your beautiful home over there in Sammamish. You've got the plants, you've got the light on. It's beautiful in the home. We've been at home since February. And, I'm sure just like many of you, it's been a pivoting season for all of us. I think a lot of us, when we were sitting there in January trying to cast our vision for the year, only the good Lord could have predicted this one coming. And every year I walk into the new year saying, hey, what's coming? God, what are you going to put on my plate? What's new? What are we going to learn this year? And, oh my goodness, we quickly learned how to work at home. Like, I'll apologize. You might hear the kids or the dogs screaming their heads off upstairs. Bless my wife for corralling them during this webinar. So obviously everybody's learning to work from home, learning to adapt. And of course that translates over to our churches too. Every church is in different places all across the nation, and some have already been in this digital sphere for quite a while. And obviously there's some, they're like, oh my gosh, let's go, let's start it up, let's get it going. It's all about how are you connecting with your congregational members, excuse me. It's all a new learning experience for all of us. And at Pushpay and Church Community Builder, our heart is to really build a community of belonging and keeping everybody connected together in bigger and better ways. So I'm going to turn it over to Troy here in just a second. He's going to talk about what we're experiencing on our platforms in regards to digital giving trends and what some of our friends are saying across the board. So Troy, I'll kick it over to you to share your screen. And please, as you guys have questions, feel free to drop them right into the chat there in the Zoom window, and we'll bring them up as they come up. Otherwise, we'll have some questions at the end too. So thank you so much for taking some time to join us, and we hope that we're leaving you with some good nuggets of wisdom that you can apply today.
Just 1 second, Tyler, go ahead. I'm just trying to share my screen, so if you could just keep going for one more second.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, like we were talking about, it's just this huge season of pivoting for everybody. And if we have an opportunity, we'd love to hear just in the chat, if there's some good takeaways that you've learned from your church. Definitely let us know where you're coming from. Everybody is in different seasons, different places, some challenges you might experience. We want to hear that as technology partners with the church, because that helps us identify where our technology kind of needs to pivot. I'm going to start charging every time I say that. So yeah, let us know what you're experiencing and how we can help grow your communication tools, grow your strategy, help grow the Big C church. And with that, I'll pass it over to Troy.
Cool. Thanks, Tyler. Appreciate that. Thanks for pivoting and taking that extra 30 seconds as I transitioned. I just want to confirm that you can see my screen okay?
Absolutely. That's great.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Tyler. And thanks again, Joe, for the opportunity to join the Seat Network and your audience. Really excited about today's conversation, and a couple things up front in terms of housekeeping. Please drop some notes or some questions in the chat. Tyler's going to be monitoring that. We want to make sure that this is a value add for you. We want to make sure that some of the questions that you have percolating in your head as you're navigating these unprecedented times, as you're Tyler, we want to make sure that some of your questions get answered. And so this is conversational.
For just a quick second, I think your Apple headphones are giving you trouble again with the audio. Do you want to take a quick second and switch it over to your computer audio? And this will be recorded. We'll have all this stuff shared out with everybody out here soon. And looks like Troy's about ready to go, so we'll kick it back over to him.
Check 1 2. Check 1 2.
Sounds much better. Thank you.
Apologies. Was I the Darth Vader again?
It catches every other word.
Okay. Well, as I was saying, feel free to drop any questions, comments that you have in the chat. Tyler will be monitoring that. We want to make sure that this next 45, 50 minutes is a value add for you as you're leading through this time. And we come with a lot of information. We're partnered with over 10,000 churches, so we can talk a little bit about trends that we're seeing. Today, we're going to talk about some hacks to maintain giving, even increase giving during this time. But thank you again for the opportunity to join you all. Hopefully this finds you well and you're in good health right now. So today's agenda is going to be, just at a macro level. We'll start kind of high level. What is it like living in a digital era that we're all living in right now? We'll kind of share some data on charitable giving as a whole, both inside and outside the church. And as I mentioned, we'll give you 3 hacks for you all to use and leverage to maintain and bolster giving even during COVID-19 that, as Tyler mentioned, none of us had on our agenda and expected when we were building our strategic plan at the beginning of this year. Then we'll talk a little bit about the power of recurring giving and show some data around that. And then we'll formally open it up for Q&A. So that's a little bit about today's agenda. So as I mentioned, what is it like living in this digital era? So we like to throw this slide up there kind of just to get everybody on the same page, to make sure we're singing from the same hymnal book, so to speak. On the left of the screen, you can see a photo from 2005, and on the right, you see 2017, both at the same place, St. Peter's Square, at the announcement and the address of our popes. One major difference that you can probably see without me drawing your attention from these 2 images is the sheer amount of screens on the right side. In 2017, I don't think any individual that was there at St. Peter's Square took in Pope Francis's address without documenting it through their screen, whether that's an iPad or an iPhone, or for you Android users out there with an Android. Over on the left, everybody's taking it in through their 2 eyeballs. If you look at the bottom right of the image on the left, you can see one screen. I think it's a flip phone. It might be a Razr down there. But basically, we like to talk about this and just say, you know what? Digital is here to stay. It is not a fad. It is not something that's going to go away. It is here to stay. And the question we want you to wrestle with, as you have been wrestling with it with your team, is how are you preparing your church for success? And a lot of the customers that we are partnered with here in the space, they've been preparing for this for some time, and they are seeing growth, they are seeing increase, and they are leveraging technology as a part of their strategy to build their church. It's no longer this a la carte or this add-on. It is part of the infrastructure that they're building to reach their community. And as we talk a little bit about trends, we're going to talk about how to leverage technology to maximize adoption of technology in your community and in your church. But one fun fact, Tyler, I know what I'm about to say, it's a bit ethereal and it's kind of hard to wrap our mind around, but technology is anticipated and projected to be 32 times more advanced than it is today.
It is truly just amazing trying to wrap a brain around that. I know you still got some more numbers to go through, but just that first number is just amazing. Go ahead.
In 5 years' time, technology is projected to be 32 times more advanced. In 10 years' time, technology is projected to be 1,000 times more advanced. And in just 20 years' time from today, in the year 2040, technology is projected from the experts out there to be 1 million times more advanced than it is today. And as I mentioned, that's a big thing. It's hard to wrap our mind around that. So just to conceptualize that for our audience, what can that look like? What can that be? Well, Elon Musk recently, in fall of last year, successfully implanted a chip into a chimpanzee's brain, and that chimpanzee was able to control their computer at the speed of thought. Now, the reason why he's doing this is because he's trying to give people that are physically impaired, who are paralyzed and unable to work on a keyboard and a mouse and navigate a computer, the ability to control it through their mind, through their thought process, which is a revolutionary idea. But ladies and gentlemen and friends, that just happened this last fall. That's the type of stuff that technology can allow us to do. So when we're talking about it's going to be 32 times more advanced and 1,000 times and 1,000,000 times more advanced, the main point here, it's here to stay. How are we as the church leveraging it to share the message that has never changed for 2,000 years and reach the church and our patrons and the people in our cities with this type of technology, which brings me to my next slide. And feel free to drop in the chat right there. I always like to ask this question. You can see 5 different, very well-known applications and companies on a smartphone. How many of you have 5 for 5, 5 of these apps on your phone? 4 for 5, 3 for 5. What are you, Ty?
I have not jumped on the Spotify train yet. That is the one thing I'm holding out on. Okay,
prayer line for you after the webinar here. But generally speaking, a lot of the folks, when we ask this type of question, are anywhere from 5 out of 5 or 4 out of 5. The greater majority of people, when we talk about this, have at least half of these apps on their phone. Why? Because this is the world that we're living in today. This is how we live our life. We have probably ordered something this week already on Amazon, and it's on its way to our doorstep, and it might very well be there right now. We are engaging in Instagram. We're sharing our photos, sharing our life. We're liking. We've created a community. These are immersive. They are part of our life. The average adult is spending over 4 hours per day on their smartphone. That is not a typo. And for those of you out there, Troy, I am not part of that adult that is spending 4 hours a day. I'm not going to say you're wrong, but I encourage you to, and if you have an iPhone, you can go into your settings and you can view how long on average you are viewing your screen. I thought I was one of the individuals that was not part of that bucket. I thought I was about an hour and a half to maybe 2.5 hours a day. Sure enough, Troy fits in that category of 4 hours plus per day. Why? Because we're checking text messages, we're sending emails off, we're listening to a song, we're dropping on social media, we're ordering a package on Amazon. This all just builds up over time. And the real point, the chief point that I want to make from this is that the same people that are coming through our doors on weekends or tuning in online now during Corona, they have this same type of device. They are interacting with these types of technology and applications Monday through Friday. So how are we as the church leveraging this type of technology that's considered world-class to share that message that we're talking about? Tyler, I'll take a break right there. Are there any questions coming through right now?
Nothing at the moment.
Okay, cool. So moving on from that, now that we've kind of addressed at a macro level, what type of digital era are we living in? How are people interacting with technology? Us at Pushpay, we're really trying to be at the forefront and build technology, much like those brands that I had on that last slide. So kind of pivoting, coming down in terms of charitable giving, which we're going to talk a little bit about today. For the first time in 2018, digital giving declined for the first time in years. And what I want to bring your attention to is a couple of these facts right here. And this was us in partnership with the Giving USA report of 2019. So not too old on the data, it's less than 12 months old, but charitable giving by individuals overall declined by 1% in 2018 compared to an increase of 5% in 2017. And that's a fascinating stat. Giving to religious causes declined by 1.5%. And you might be saying, Troy, what does that mean? How do people give to religious causes, but that's not charitable giving, but that's not the church? I'm glad you asked. Things like human services, education, health organizations, foundations, arts, cultures, humanities, that's all in this charitable type giving. The last point there, giving to religious organization, is only 29% of the overall charitable giving in the US, which is down from 58% in the 1980s. Now, Tyler, my friend here, was not born at that point in time, but the majority of this audience, I'm sure you can remember those days in the 1980s when almost 60% of all charitable giving was given to the church. Well, that has reduced greatly. And I would love to know if you're experiencing this type of stuff in your churches and your organization. So feel free to drop any confirmations in the chat there. But traditionally, we're finding millennials who, by the way, are very generous in nature. 85% of millennials donate, they give on a yearly basis. That is astronomically high for any generation. The problem is on average, they're only giving about $400 per year. And of that $400, they diversify of who they're giving it to. So it's no longer all of their charitable giving is going to that church. I mentioned a moment ago, human services, education, health organizations. Millennials like to participate and be part of something that is bigger than them, that is having a global impact. And so that's why this is no longer just being channeled directly to the church, it's being diversified. So now that we've kind of set the tone a little bit, how are we navigating? What trends are we seeing? And how are churches leveraging coronavirus, COVID-19, to make sure that they're seeing increase in giving through this period of time? So we've spent a lot of time interviewing and asking and researching our churches and seeing what are they doing to bolster giving during this time. So hack number one, and feel free to take notes, but we will circulate the slide deck after, is number one, hack number one, do not skip core day. Now, if you've ever heard people that like to lift weights and work out, it's called don't skip leg day, but we're talking about the core here. What really is your core? Your core is those individuals that are with you, heart and soul. Now, it varies across the size of your church. This could be 20%, it could be 18%, it could be 25%. I know we have hundreds of people on this webinar and your breakdown is different, but generally speaking, it's widely adopted that 20% of your church is your core. They are financially participating on a weekly, monthly basis. They are there when the doors are open. They're volunteering. And then you have this other section of people, call it 80%, 75%. Again, it varies based on percentages across churches that aren't. The first thing that we want you to do and encourage you to do to bolster giving during COVID-19 is don't forget about your core. How are you reaching your core? How are you nurturing your core? Are you making personal phone calls to check in with your core? Is your senior pastor, is your pastoral care team reaching out to them to make sure their family, they're making it through this time? From a back office perspective, have you segmented your givers? And this is going to get a little challenging because I know we have a large audience on this and you're using different types of church management software systems or back-end systems or spreadsheets, but generally speaking, you can segment your core givers versus your occasional givers or your infrequent givers. And we encourage you to focus on these core with those phone calls, with those outreaches. Have they received a thank you note in the mail from your senior pastor or somebody on staff, just thank you for participating financially during this time. Reaching out and seeing if they're okay from a job placement perspective. You know, so many folks, unfortunately, have had challenges with their work. And I think we all probably know somebody that might have gotten coronavirus during this time. And are we reaching out and stabilizing our core? Have we emailed them? Maybe they are more analog givers. An analog giver is a cash or a check giver. Have we emailed this core to say, thank you so much for your financial participation? Because we're unable to meet in gatherings, might you consider setting up an electronic contribution with the link so that they could give electronically? And obviously there's those folks that, you know, they still like licking the envelope and filling out that and writing, you know, where their contribution is going to go. Some churches that we're working with, they will have a drop box outside so people can still drop off their cash or their check contribution. It doesn't matter how you do this. It's not a one size fits all. The main point that we want to encourage you to do is don't skip core day. The key here is to stabilize the heart and soul, the folks that are really with you, irrespective of if they're a digital giver or a analog giver. Focus on them, nurture them, reach out to them, stabilize them. Once they are stabilized, hack number 2 is generosity breeds generosity. We want you to create a reason for people to give again. The churches that we are partnered with right now that have not seen a dip of giving during COVID have actually seen an increase. They are phenomenal at telling stories of what your generosity is doing in our community. How are we feeding the hungry? How are we clothing the naked? What are we doing in our community to make sure that people are good? How are we as a church being generous? And this comes in a plethora of different opportunities and different ways. You could do this in written form. You could do this at the beginning of your worship service that you're streaming online. It doesn't matter if you're on Facebook or YouTube. Tell that story up front of what is your church doing, what lives have been changed, have salvations happen, have people come to accept the Lord through this period of time. Well, your generosity helps us, enables us to continue to go online and share this type of message. You know, as people, why did Jesus always speak in stories? Is because that's how our minds retain things. So tell those type of impact stories. Understand the viewership pattern of folks tuning in on your online worship service. You know, life is so busy and we have breakfast to make usually on a Sunday morning, or the kids to walk and get dressed and showered and clean. We have the dog to take care of. So generally speaking, people are not able to sit full captive in front of the TV watching the full 90-minute or 2-hour service. So understand viewership behavior, and people are going to spike at the beginning of service and then it's going to begin to taper off the longer the service goes. And that's not bad. That's just understanding people's viewing behavior. So bring that segment of whether it's receiving the offertory, talking about generosity, to the earlier portion of the service. A tactical hack is on the lower third. You know, go ahead and put, hey, visit www.blah-blah-blah.com to give. Have a QR code that they can take a snapshot on their mobile device. Drive them to the text message number that you have set up. Drive them to the way to exercise that generosity. And then the last point I want to make here is do more with confirmation emails. Traditionally speaking, any digital giving provider that you might have has some sort of confirmation email that your contribution went through. Don't just say success. Do more with that. Show your appreciation. Tell those stories. Confirmation emails really are your first opportunity to engage with somebody after they've given financially. Maximize that moment, thank them, see them, tell them what you're doing with that, share the impact with them. Again, generosity breeds generosity, and the more that you give people a reason to give, they're going to continue to do this. We know the scripture that says the world of the generous gets larger and larger, the world of the stingy gets smaller and smaller. So we want to give people a reason to be generous, and it's going to continue and create this flywheel. So hack number 1 was don't skip core day. Hack number 2 is generosity breeds generosity. We want to give people a reason to give again, and we want to create this culture and behavior of generosity. Hack number 3, and this is a fun one, is the system produces what the system produces. No, I am not Nick Saban, and we are not Alabama football. However, there is a key truth in the system produces what the system produces. None of us had COVID-19 on our radars, full stop. None of us knew that a global pandemic was going to hit us, our nation, our world, and the church this year. We can embrace it or we can fight it. We can embrace it and see opportunities that may come available, or we could get upset that this wrecked our plan. I hope you're like me and looking at the positive and the former of this and saying, okay, cool. How do we pivot? How do we navigate? How do we leverage this time? And I got one big idea for you. No longer are our churches and our worship gatherings limited to our seating capacity in our auditorium. Now, we've worked so hard on creating a great environment, building a beautiful auditorium and a beautiful church. And I know I want to get back to church as much as you do, but we don't have that possibility right now in many states. So what can we do? Well, there's no borders or boundaries to who can view us now online. There's no fire code. There's no seat limitation on how many pews or seats that we have. And really, this has expanded who can really be in our reach as a church and as an organization. What does that mean? There's potentially new givers out there in the neighboring city that are watching, the neighboring state, the neighboring country. Like, this is a global opportunity. And so many churches that we're partnering with see that, and they're speaking to a new audience as well as their core, but a new audience that might have otherwise never tuned in or walked through the door of their church. So they're seeing this as a new opportunity to attract new givers. So we invite you and encourage you to think about that and then create an email series for those first-time givers. Disclaimer, this is not the time to ask them to give again. When you get a brand new giver, don't say, thank you for your gift. Do you want to give again? No. Thank them for their gift. Educate them. Educate to motivate. Educate them on why this is such a significant spiritual act of their gift. Educate them about your ministries. Who are you as a church? What do you stand for? What is your mission? What is your vision? Why are you there in the community? What do you want to see God do through your church? This is a great opportunity to educate them, to motivate them. Invite them to download your church app if you have one. If you don't, invite them to your church's website where you're talking about, this is our heartbeat. This is why we created this church 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. What is your mission? What was the need that you saw there in your city that your senior leaders said, you know what, we are going to be a church in this city. We're going to bring hope. We're going to bring encouragement. This is a great opportunity to attract brand new givers and begin to get them into the funnel and tell them who you are and the spiritual significance of their contribution. Again, big disclaimer, the goal for an email series for first-time giver is not to ask them to give again. It's to reinforce the value of what they've already done and help them see the role generosity plays in their spiritual growth. I'll pause right there and I'll just reiterate hack 1, 2, and 3. And Ty, let me know if there's any questions. Hack number 1, Don't skip core day. Hack number 2, generosity breeds generosity. Hack number 3, the system produces what the system produces. And hopefully these created some thought bubbles for you of how you can leverage some of these in your church to make sure that you're bolstering and continuing to see people exercise their generosity there in your church. Before I go to the next slide, Ty, are there any questions or any things you'd like me to add?
There are 2 questions. The first one came from Thomas. We'll get back to that one a little bit towards the end. But the one I want to touch on now was from Michelle. I believe this is talking about the reduction in giving. Sorry, I'm checking out my chat screen down here below. Let's see. So thinking about that percentage of the reduction in giving over time, is that reduction also due to decrease of members in the congregation due to age or lack of interest?
Yeah, that's a great question, Michelle. And I think she was referring to that overall charitable giving stat that we had a couple slides ago. I would love to hear what you think about that. What are you seeing there at your church? We have hypothesis, and we've learned a lot from the 10,000 churches. The 10,000 churches that we've been able to partner with. And I think that it's not just a one answer blanket statement. It's a bunch of different things. There's the millennials that we talked about a moment ago who are diversifying their generosity to different organizations that are charitable. There's also people that are leaving the church, to your point, who are no longer staying inside of the church. So there's a bunch of contributing factors. One slide that I didn't put up, but I'm going to go back to it right now, and I think that this will help, is during this digital transformation, we've seen that checks went from representing 46% of all contributions to now less than 15 in a 10-year period. More than 1/5 of millennials have never written a check. Tyler, have you written a check?
I haven't. In fact, hold on. I got one right here.
Oh, wow.
I haven't used it in months. I just have it on the counter for some reason.
This is not planned, but look at you. You are an overachieving millennial. So these are some of the things, Michelle, is yes, millennials, they don't write checks. Their income is not the same as the baby boomers or even the Gen X. So their contributions are just naturally less because their income is naturally less. Additionally, I want to use my words carefully here, but people are enjoying summer right now. People are enjoying the mountains. People are enjoying the lakes and the ocean. And generally speaking, when they're not there physically, their contribution can't be there as well, which for us in these last 2 points are more of a hope, and that we have seen on our platform. And by the way, by the grace of God, we have processed $15 billion since our inception 8 years ago. And that's just very humbling. That's not a brag by any stretch of the imagination. It's to create the magnitude and the gravity of some of the trends that we see and some of the data that we're putting up there. This is over a significant amount of money, and that we see that 73% of total giving happens Monday through Saturday. This is revolutionary because I grew up in a home where my dad would put the check on the refrigerator and we would have to wait until the weekend worship service to put that in the plate. Well, no longer does that have to happen. And because somebody or a family is not there in person, that doesn't mean that their contribution has to stop as well too, because they can set up recurring, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But 73% of all giving that we've seen on our platform across $15 billion has happened Monday through Saturday. So these are some of the ways that we see hope, and we see digital giving really coming alongside and helping counteract that dip in charitable giving that we've talked about over the last couple of years. So hopefully, Michelle, that answered your question. Do you want to go back to the other one, Ty?
That one I think we can wait a little bit longer on. Phil asked a question as well, which I think is actually a great point. Don't you think some of the reduction in charitable giving is due to the limitation on tax deductibility? And it is actually a pretty decent point. And one, if we go, one level up and think about nonprofits across the board, It is. Everything is down across the board. Prior to coming at Pushpay, I was a corporate fundraising officer at a museum. And yeah, once those tax deductions changed, both on the individual giving and corporate giving side, we saw those numbers kind of start to subtly drop a bit. I think a lot of it was just down to, you want to say, donor fatigue sometimes. Obviously, everybody gives to many great organizations, and that can be a challenge too. So, Phil, hope that one answered that question for you.
That is a fantastic point, Phil. And we try to, we're not lawyers or can't give financial advice. So we try to tread lightly around that. But I think what you are saying is spot on. I think your hypothesis is accurate. 2018, I believe, is when that new initiative in terms of tax credit went into place. And there was a lot of churches that we were partnered with that saw about a 10% dip in overall giving throughout the course of the year than what they forecasted and what they suspected. That's significant. Whether you're a small or a medium or a large size church, it was about a 10% difference. We saw the bounce back last year, 2019, kind of come back up. So hopefully we're seeing an upward trend, but I think your point is absolutely well taken and spot on. So us at Pushpay, this is the way that we kind of think about digital giving. We think about digital giving as a highway. And no matter how you enter this highway, from a check, from a text, from a kiosk, from online, or from cash, you enter this highway and it brings you to mobile. We talked about Amazon at the very, very beginning. Just to kind of breaking news, Amazon has a plan for you as well. Some of the greatest technology companies that we engage with on a daily basis have a plan too, and they're trying to get you, in Amazon's case, to Prime. Pushpay is trying to get all members, all givers to mobile, and all roads lead to mobile, so to speak, because the power of mobile is you can give that contribution from anywhere at any time. So if you're thinking of engaging in a digital giving strategy, if you haven't quite yet, or if you're looking to bolster your digital giving strategy, we encourage you to not just think of giving as a cul-de-sac where they make their contribution, you confirm it, end of story. Think about how do we get them to your church's mobile app, your website, so that they can engage with you on a daily basis from their mobile device. Because as we talked about, people are engaging on mobile devices at a rate of 4+ hours per day. And here's really what it allows you to do, is it allows you to get folks on recurring giving. We know that recurring givers are more generous than one-time givers. We've talked about people being away for vacation, for the beach, for holiday. Oh, by the way, a forced pandemic, stay at home. When people are giving on a recurring basis, this fits within their lifestyle, mortgages, car payments, gym memberships, phone, water bills, gas. This is how we as a society are engaging with payments, with finances. We have a monthly, we have a bi-weekly frequency that's coming out in an automated fashion. And so we have a very easy way for people to do this. And we encourage you to tell your customer base or your contributor base to set up these recurring gifts that come out automatically. 2 points that we want to bring your attention to there on the left, and we'll begin to land this plane, is more than 50% of churches using Pushpay see a 76% increase in recurring givers in that first year, which is staggering. We've worked very hard on our software to make it almost easier to set up a recurring contribution than a one-time contribution, because we know the power of recurring contributions coming through. It helps you as a church budget and forecast what's coming through. It helps you through a forced pandemic as well to keep the revenue stream coming in. The second point I would like to make, and I'm going to kind of create two little stories here. So this last kind of data, it can be confusing. So here in my right hand, this is my right hand, we have Joe, and here in my left hand, we have Susie. So Joe in my right hand, he just is a one-time giver. He gives every time he comes through the office, comes through the building. He gives one time electronically. He started the year with good intentions on January 1. You know what? I'm going to be a tither this year. I'm going to give 10% of my income, and I'm really excited about it. Susie over here on my left, the same desire. She wants to give at 10%. She set up on January 1 a recurring contribution, $100 a week, $100 a month, whatever it is. At the end of that year, only 13% of people in Joe's category finished that year with that same desire they had. 72% of people in Susie's category finished that year giving at a recurring fashion. We know this. We all start the year wanting to go to the gym once a week, 4 times a week, eat better, love our spouse better, do all these great things, but we know that the fatigue happens as the year sets in. The same thing happens with contributors to our church. Those that don't set up a recurring or don't set up a mechanism to help them exercise their generosity, they just get busy. They get distracted. They leave the church. They're busy at extended periods of time. The forced pandemic has stopped their giving. Only 13% of people finished that year starting out what they desired, whereas in this category, 72% of the folks finished that year with their desire. So recurring is so crucial to your church, and it also helps people exercise their generosity, even though they may not be stepping foot in your buildings. And this is really what allowed so many churches on our platform that we talk to. So many of them are actually seeing an uptick and an increase in giving through this pandemic, which is crazy. And that's not every church that's seeing that, because we know a lot of churches are being hit very, very hard. But when you have these systems in place and when you have technology helping you receive these contributions, people are generous in nature and they're exercising their generosity through this period of time. The last point we're going to make before we kind of wrap is digital givers are 8 times more likely to give to multiple initiatives within your church. Key point there, within your church. Not digital givers are 8 times more likely to be generous and give to humanitarians and educations and health. No, this is 8 times more likely to give to multiple initiatives within your church. A COVID fund, a building fund, a missionary fund. Digital givers that have a contribution already set up are 8 times more likely to give to multiple initiatives within your church, which is a staggering stat. Okay. So hopefully this was a value add and open to some Q&A, and hopefully we can have a bit of a conversation from this. But no matter where you sit on this spectrum, if you've never adopted digital technology or you're an expert and you're just rethinking your strategy, the ways that we are encouraging you to overcome this change is to, number 1, choose a giving solution that complements what you're already using in terms of your integrations. What other software are you using? What church management software system are you using? Choose somebody that is compatible with that. Choose a partner that has APIs and integrations that work within what already you have as an infrastructure. Find a tool that makes your admin team like you. Evaluate tools that can simplify the current bookkeeping process, not a ancillary solution that's outdated that they have to download all the transactions over here and then input it into over here and then connect with over here, because come end of year, that's going to be very challenging for your team to send out the annual giving statement. So find a partner that integrates with your tool and it saves times for your administrative. And then obviously, support is so crucial. I'm sure a lot of you listening to this webinar are not what you would call yourself as a technologist. And that's okay. That's why companies like Pushpay and other companies exist, is we want to do what we're strong in and come alongside and help you do what you're strong in, which is love people, help people, build a church, reach a community, do things that we can't do. And it's beautiful when these two worlds come together. But specifically speaking, churches are unique in that, their business operations hours are heavily on Saturdays and Sundays. And don't just find a partner out there that is open Monday through Friday, because when you need help on Saturday and Sunday, it's going to be a bad situation. So find somebody that's empathetic, They understand your world. They understand the needs and the nuances that you have. And then lastly, communication is key. Determine how changes will be communicated before the launch, both internally and externally. Take your patrons, take your audience and your community on a journey and let them know why you're beginning to leverage technology to receive contributions, have a church app. What is the power behind this? Talk about security, talk about feature set, talk about all the wins that come along with that. And with that, thank you so much for your attention and being a part of today's webinar. It was an honor to join you and the SEEP network, and just wanted to thank Joe once again for having us be a part of this. And we will open up to any questions right now.
Yeah, we got one from Jim. When talking about reoccurring giving, the set it and forget it, how do you suggest we message so as to avoid encouraging people to set up a giving amount and leaving it unchanged for 5 years? How do you hopefully eventually get them to come up to the next step as you get them more deeper engaged and hopefully moving into that 20% category rather than the whatever amount they set it and 10 years later they're still giving the same amount?
Thank you, Jim, for your question. I think you bring up a good point, and I didn't hit on it because I was, trying to get through to some Q&A, but the giving moment can be such a sacred moment in church where we are actually bringing our tithe and bringing our offering and putting it in the bucket or the plate or whatever the tradition is. And that's such a sacred moment. And we don't want to lose sight of that. We still want people to feel like they're contributing to the mission and the vision of that house. And one practical way is a church that we're partnered with, they print out envelopes that says, I'm a recurring giver. So people actually put that in the plate as it goes by. So it's kind of like a memory, like, yeah, I have this thing coming out every week, every 2 weeks, every month, but I'm actually a recurring giver and I'm still putting that in the plate. As far as reminding them that it's not just a set it and forget about it, a continual confirmation email acknowledging that contribution. How is it going to the overall mission? How are those funds being used? How are lives being changed? How many salvations and baptisms and great success stories? Tell those stories. Practically speaking, there's some companies out there, and Pushpay is one of them, where if your credit card or ACH is about to expire, it would send you a series of follow-up emails to let you know that your expiration date is coming up, and now's a great time to put in a new card details. So what I'm trying to say here is there's kind of the spiritual side of it. How can you still reach those people that it's such a sacred moment to give? B, it's like, okay, cool. How can we tell the stories to continue to reinforce it? And then C, tactically speaking, how can we come alongside? So that was kind of the way that I wanted to answer the question with those three things. We can talk a lot about how to drill into each one of those, but I would say from a spiritual standpoint, make sure that they still feel that they're giving a part of the church and exercising that spiritual discipline. B, tell those stories. Keep that front and center from your online sermons to your confirmation emails. How are their contributions helping you? And then C, tactically speaking, feel free to follow up with them when cards are about to go out or they need to refresh some of their stuff. Did you get a pay increase? Did you get a bonus this year? Feel free to edit your contributions to make sure you're still exercising that tenth or that tithe or however you choose to communicate it there, your organization. But great question, Jim, and hopefully that was a clear answer for you.
One question from Dan: what kind of content should a church app include? And my philosophy on this is, what do you want your members to be seeing? How do you want them to stay connected? Obviously, probably a good 99% of Americans has one of these, and they're looking at this. This is always in their hand. It's a beautiful device that I use way too often. Troy, I really don't want to know what my weekly usage is on this. But how can you get something in front of them that they're regularly going to look at? Like, I'll admit today's my birthday, and so this thing has been going off all morning.
Today's your birthday?
It is.
Happy birthday, Tyler Snook.
Thanks, Troy. So to that point, when this is always going off, that's not a good amount of content to be pushing out to your church member. You want just enough to keep them engaged, clicking it, listening to the podcast, seeing what events are coming up that particular week. If you've got some worship on here, these are some great ways to keep them involved and engaged with that. Troy, any points to that?
Great question, Dan. And Tyler, I think you answered it well. I think something, Dan, that might be sticky for you, so to speak, is we talk about the website being your front door, but an app being your kitchen table. So if you're following this analogy, your website is for the entire masses, anybody in the entire world, to see what your church stands for. It's more high-level stuff. It's more information stuff. It's our values. It's our core. It's our leadership team. It's their photos. It's who they are. It's big idea type stuff. The app is for your church community, not the world to see, but your church community. This is quick fire information about what's happening in the life of your church that week. This is push notification. This is specific information to Tyler and his family, inviting them to the vacation Bible school that we have coming up next week for his kids. This is typically your newsletter type, bulletin type stuff, information. What to put into it would be more ways to give, ways to engage with your church, sermons, videos, podcast. Is your team having a blog? Does your pastor write a weekly blog or a thought of the day? That newsletter bulletin type stuff is what we encourage you to put in the app. Push notifications are key because Tyler has his phone going off today with all these personal happy birthday type messages. That's what you want. 97% of text messages / push notifications are read. Only 2% of emails are read. So this is the quick fire information to that person, personalized, whereas your website is more of your front door.
That's great. Let's see here. We have two questions, Catherine and Jeffrey. I think we could probably tie them together. Catherine's question is, we already have an online giving platform. Our challenge is finding new ways to ask parishioners to give. Any great ideas on a new way to say, please give? And the second question from Jeffrey, how successful can matching or challenge campaigns be, i.e. raise your pledge by 10% and a generous parishioner will match your increase?
Yeah, those are really fun questions. Very complex question. And what we're going to do is just talk about different trends that we've seen, because obviously there's great success stories in matching and cataclysmic failures in matching. I think I'll take the first part of the question first, Tyler. And I think human nature. If we hear a story that there is something impactful that's happening, we are more inclined to be generous. And so that's why I keep talking about being a storyteller as a church. What are you doing in your community? How are you helping people? It may be small, but tell that one small story. It may be only one life that has been impacted, but please tell that story. Human nature will be more generous to be a part of something that is happening in the community for good than maybe something that is not, and just saying, yeah, it's a biblical discipline, please give right now. That just is not it doesn't evoke as much motivation, as excitement that I'm giving to something and I can see where my dollars are going, because transparency is key here. We want to tell the people, what are we doing with their dollars? And that is a great opportunity to do that. To the second part of the question, the matching side of it, I'm reluctant to say it's successful or not successful or ways to do it, because, we've heard such opposite ends of the spectrum type feedback, just high level successes and not successes. Right now, I think it's probably challenging to answer your question, sir, because of coronavirus and the stay at home. I think that might be a challenge, is if you're raising for a building fund or a parking lot and doing the matching thing. I think that might be a little challenging right now. I would encourage you to focus just on your core and stabilizing them, because whenever we come out of this, that'll be a great time to leverage it. I'm on the board at my church in Seattle. We're 5 locations up here and multiplied thousands of people. We've created different ways to engage with the core during this time, not to use a matching, but just to make sure that they're taken care of and focused during this time, because we know this too shall pass. And when we come out on the other side of it, that's going to be the time to leverage it. We know that people are going through a lot of financial heartache right now. I mean, the unemployment rate is so high. So many people are losing their job and being furloughed. I think that matching thing just has a really big opportunity to not go well during this time. So we're encouraging people to maybe hit the pause button. But if that's crucial for you as a church and you need it right now because you're trying to pay the bills, I would just encourage you to be surgical about how you communicate it and very delicate, because there are so many people that have been affected financially, and you don't want as a church to come across needy in any way, shape, or form.
That's great. Thank you, Troy. Well, I think this is a great time to land the plane. We want to make sure we give everybody enough time to run and do their bathroom breaks or refill their coffee before the next meeting, because of course, this is a time for meetings and time to pivot and keep growing and learning and keeping engaged with your parishioners. So thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you to Joe from the SEEP Network for allowing us to come and talk with you all a little bit. And we really hope this has just been a great time for you, and hope you're able to take something home with you. If we weren't able to get your question, Joe put some comments in there. I put my personal email in there. So if you got any more questions, we would love to make sure we get those answered to connect with you. So thank you all again. Be blessed. We hope this is a great time for you all. Bye now.
Thank you.